Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. I'm excited to be back with you for another episode this week. Milou, how are things going in the hot of Texas?
Good. Staying inside for sure at the moment or by the pool, so it's definitely peak heat at the moment, but really can't complain. It's been really actually quite mild considering. So what about you?
Yeah, I'm one full day back from vacation where we exhausted ourselves and brought home some little bugs with us. So feeling not the greatest, but better than the rest of my family. So excited to distract myself with a good topic this week. This week we're going to talk shadow IT. Concept most people probably kind of know something about, but might be something that hopefully this becomes kind of one of those kind of basics episodes where we can kind of talk through what it is, some of its implications, and some of the how do we deal with it side of things. So Milou, why don't we start? If you want to kind of just take the first crack at, what is shadow IT and why is this a problem for us in the industry?
Yeah, so shadow IT is really technology, whether that's software devices, applications, that is being used for company work that the company does not officially know about, manage, or secure. So it can happen really easily where one team is like, oh, hey, quick, I need this thing. And maybe their boss says, great, go for it, without looping in IT and security or, the operations team to vet it. And suddenly you have corporate confidential information that's funneling into a tool that your tech team is unaware of. So it happens really easily. I think the how it happens is very often it's quick approvals. It's a lack of a repetitive approval process with the IT team, or unclear approval channels, or just a lack of enforcement. So whether or not IT has a process in place, it's also whether the upper management is actually saying hey, that's the process we're going to follow and need to follow. So it could also just be a lack of enforcement. IT is kind of a silo managing certain things, and then approvals are happening on the other side of the business. Or teams don't have IT, a company doesn't have IT resources, or they have insufficient resources, I feel is generally how it happens.
Yeah, and I think there's a new vector as we were kind of putting this outline together that I don't know. I haven't necessarily heard tagged as shadow IT, but I think it fits in this bucket as how we're describing it pretty well, which is as we create AI applications and we start doing this whole vibe coding thing and everything, people creating applications that they then start using is a form of shadow IT because it's not something that IT is controlling. It's not putting into its own processes and ways of doing things in order to have the proper safety controls and stuff that you mentioned. And X for bad, I think, for those cases is that those may not always have the proper security controls embedded in them, the proper validation and whatnot to make sure that they are secure pieces of software to begin with. So I think that's an area where things may be sneaking in a little bit more than we have in the past, if you will, because generally we've been talking about software that people just download.
I think another area that I haven't seen as much about, but I think as we were kind of researching this one came up is also browser extensions and the lack of, it's pretty rare that companies have managed browsers. And so it's pretty easy for employees to also have browser extensions that can just be downloaded onto their Chrome application to do whatever widget they are trying to solve for. So I think that's an interesting one that as we were kind of researching this episode also was that's definitely an area where IT, if they're not using a managed browser, which I don't think many companies are, I think that's probably an area too where there could be a lot of potential information that's being shared that IT doesn't know about.
Yeah. And, we all have our workflow ways of doing things. And, you know, I like to use this tool for note taking and this tool for document synchronization. And I use this tool to connect my laptop to my phone. I use this browser extension. Um, ad blocking tools is a popular one that really do need to be controlled because they have the potential of leaking a lot because you generally give them access to everything you hit within a browser, which means the potential for exfiltration of that data is really high. So yeah, the browser extensions is definitely a huge blind spot in this, I think. As somebody who does have those extensions that I like to use, I we all have worked around into the space before. We've all, I've been in IT, so we tend to be power users on the computers, which means we have access to install things around those controls a lot of times. And we all have the little tools that we need to manage stuff that no one else in the company really ever needs. So it becomes, I've always been kind of in that position of being one of the worst shadow IT people because I'm not help desk controlling what's going on people's laptops and desktops, but I've been in the IT space where I need a lot of customized tools.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think we have kind of gone over the like how and the what and the how, but I guess we can talk about again kind of like what are the like risks that it creates, because it happens quite easily where it's usually just like quick approvals that, somebody just needs something to solve for a specific problem really quickly, and then they just don't close the loop. And then the main team that's involved in approvals just doesn't find out about it until later, like during an audit, which I've had happen.
That's why we do audits.
Yeah, I know, right? Preferably internal audits for that. But some of the security risks that it creates is data exposure, right? Uploading confidential information or giving it access to things that it, shouldn't have. It being an unvetted vendor, there not being a true security review of that vendor's security controls. So there's like an unawareness of what's actually happening to the data that's being shared to that tool. And then also just like weak access controls. So, obviously if there's no process that's being followed or, you don't really have a clear guide on who actually is using the tool. Is it one person in a corporate account or is it a separate bubble of 10 users? It's like, it's not pulling into the main information security program.
Yeah, and those are all real risks. Further complicated by the fact that there's a lot of malware out there that looks like legitimate software. In fact, at work today, we got an alert about some new phishing stuff where I think it was Claude Desktop. It's kind of an interesting attack vector that maybe I'll just bring up because it does fit in this topic, which is the fact that I'll create, as an attacker, I can create software that looks a lot like Claude Desktop for this example. And I can buy a URL that looks much like Claude.com or Claude.ai, and be able to then go spend some money with Google to put myself in the ads at the top of the search results. And people naturally are going to click the first thing they find that looks legitimate. Well, this says Claude.ai and it's at the top of the list. And I just searched for Claude Desktop. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to download this thing and I'm going to install it. And if I make all those steps look legitimate enough, again, we're talking phishing techniques here for the most part. All of a sudden now I've downloaded the software, and regardless of whether you're allowed to use Claude or not, and we could talk about AI being a whole new version of shadow IT. I now have downloaded software that is, maybe works like Claude does, but in the background is just siphoning everything over to another endpoint, trying to get people to use it as much as possible so they can siphon off as much information as possible. So the risk of downloading that software in the first place is a huge risk. On that exfiltration side of things, but then you run into all these other things that you mentioned around being able to share the wrong information with them, regardless of whether they're legitimate or not. A completely legitimate piece of software that sends data somewhere else that doesn't have the right policies in place for managing that corporate data. Mm-hmm. That's a risk, even if it is a legitimate piece of software. Even if I download the Claude Desktop that information is getting outside my organization, which may not be appropriate, even if it is sending it to a legitimate company.
Yep. Yeah. And again, I think we're thinking about the non-compliance of it all, really. And it is a really big thing from an IT asset management perspective. Shadow IT is something that comes up in most audits. It's fairly common in startups, again, just like fractured teams that just don't have formal approval processes, or the processes are new. And so teams are just trying to get like a quick thing. So they're trying, so I would say the non-compliance risk is quite high. Like, this is a pretty frequent thing that you would see within an organization. And it's also then, you don't have the control over the vendors. You're missing information on your asset register. You're missing access control reviews to making sure that, if somebody leaves the company, what tool they have access to. If it's a marketing team member and it's a tool that marketing's using that's not on the register, right? There's reasons why the compliance team should be doing these reviews with the managers, to also just be like, hey, is this the full list of tools that we're using? Is there anything we're missing? Vetting that with finance to make sure that finance isn't paying for one-off credit card charges somewhere that are unaccounted for. That list should be always compared against the financial aspect of it too, to make sure that we're not missing anything. Because finance is usually the team that would know if something is on there. They're paying the bills. So I think, again, I would say this is a risk that should be in most like risk registers. It's quite common. And then thinking through, how do you continue to enforce the approval process within the organization, making it very clear that IT or operations has to be looped in anytime a team is like, hey, we need this new tool, or hey, we need this new thing.
Yeah, I like you calling out the financial aspect of it beyond the technical aspects, because one, it is money that's not being accounted for in the regular budget cycle. Even if an individual team is tracking that, is putting that in the budget, it's not properly being accounted for as the, hey, here's the tools that we're using, because there are financial categories for that kind of thing. And that finance, I've definitely seen that before too, is finance is the one that discovers things, because they're like, wait, why do you have this monthly recurring charge to the software vendor that's outside of, the central IT budget? That can be concerning for a number of reasons. Just from a financial perspective, the ability to make sure you have the proper tiers. So again, looking at how AI is purchased, it being not trained for models is different than we never touch your data. So nuances like that sometimes go unnoticed, because, hey, I'm just paying for ChatGPT for my team. But if you're not buying the right tier, if you're not buying it the right way, it may not be protecting the data properly. You may not be getting the proper discounts that the rest of the company, especially in a larger company where you have some weight to throw around, some negotiation capabilities, that may hurt the company overall from a pure financial perspective. And of course, the other thing that I think kind of comes into this more compliance GRC side of things, but also treads in the security side, is properly managing patches and vulnerabilities and things like that. You can't defend what you don't know about, of course, we've talked many times about, but also that capability of just making sure that, even if you don't patch everything, knowing what is unpatched, being able to track that risk. We've talked a lot about, definitely comes into play here for sure. So yeah, there's a lot of those aspects of things, and just knowing which vendors you're talking to as a company. So the company to company relationships, business to business, especially if you're like a public company, like that kind of stuff can be super strict. It can be super, it needs to be controlled and understood at the highest levels. And if you're just doing this in this little pocket off to the side without anyone else knowing about it, that is a potential risk that could exist within your organization.
Okay, so I guess the next question is like, how do you fix it, right? So I think the first thing is coming down to just like making sure that IT or the operations security team, whoever is actually responsible for the asset register, one, just has a complete picture of like, what is everybody using? And again, is checking in with the managers on a regular basis to confirm this is the full list. Like, there aren't, oh, hey, like, oh, shoot, we're, and comparing it against not only what they say versus, again, what finance is paying out of those teams' budgets, I think is really important. And then making sure that you're coming with a top-down approach as well to making sure that, the highest level is also enforcing like, hey, this is the approval process. We're all on board. This is how we're doing this. This is why we're doing it. And I would say having like a regular touch point on it, like making sure that that message is being repeated pretty widely is important to just making sure that everybody's on the same page. Like, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. I think is just step one, is just making sure you have a process and that it's being communicated.
Yeah, I think the communicating the why piece, I think, is a much unappreciated part of the puzzle. Because the next step after that, after you set your policies, is to enforce those policies, and to essentially block people from being able to install their own software, quite frankly. And again, as a power user, as somebody who has the tools I know I want to use because it makes me more efficient, it fits in with my workflows, I want to be able to install whatever I want. But at the same time, I've had it communicated to me very clearly in the past, like, we just can't let you do that for these reasons. And making sure that technically I can't do that, because policies are great, procedures are great, but if I can install whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, from wherever I want, it doesn't matter at that point. All that matters is how do you deal with it, policies. So having those clear, and once you lock things down, having a clear and easy path to getting one-off tools approved is super important. Again, having been in that seat where I really need this tool, why are you going to make me spend 3 weeks doing justifications and filling out paperwork and talking to these boards just to get a simple, I need to upload tool? Makes it more likely that I'm going to go around the process. I'm going to find ways to use my knowledge, which there's, we all know it's not a matter of if, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. People will get around them. AI has proven to be very good at helping to get around some of these barriers that we put in place and things like this for me to be able to get what I want in place. So make it easy so that it's not easier for me to go and try to hack my own machine to install this one piece of software than it is to just get approval and get it pushed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think just like communicating the process, I think, is one thing. And then also making sure that you actually have monitoring tools to see what's going on people's devices is probably the next technical step of it, to making sure that IT can actually use defensive tools to actually monitor the machines and see what's going on, what their employees are using, so that they have a clear idea of like, hey, this is actually the systems that are being used. These are the tools that are being used, so that they actually have something that they can actually confirm what those employees are saying that they're doing with their machines.
Yeah, trust but verify is the policy there. I'd say the last thing that kind of goes along with the putting the proper controls is zero trust, controlling identities, at a network level, not just a system by system level. So, ideally you're blocking those sites that tend to hold malware. And I'm pretty sure there are services out there where you can subscribe and say, these are the sites to block. Don't let my people get to these sites. Because they're popping up all the time. There's new ones popping up that, like I said, may look like Claude.ai, but are really, something else entirely. Claude with 2 E's. Yeah. Claude.ai.com. Like we've talked about that before. When we talked about domain names and registering the proper DNS, it's pretty easy to spoof them. So making sure that, you're not just relying on perimeter defenses or just endpoint defenses. It's got to be multi-layered. It's got to, it's defense in depth. All the same security controls that we've talked about in other places apply in this conversation as well.
And then I know you said it, but I do think that just making sure that the process is easy and repeatable, I do think is important to just shout out, is like, yes, like making sure that IT hasn't overcomplicated the approval process and making sure that it is relatively swift, especially depending on the type of information that's being shared with the tool.
Yeah, it's not just about making an easy procedure. It's about being responsive to those things. And if you feel like you need to vet everything, you've got it built into the day-to-day procedures of the people that need to do that they can drop things and go do that vetting as quickly as possible. So it's not just hey, all you have to do is fill out this one form and we'll get back to you. And the get back to you can't be a day or two later. While still doing your due diligence. So it's definitely a tough nut to crack. I don't want to make it sound simple to do, but it is important, in my opinion.
It's regular awareness, oversight of the process, communication with your team, check-ins, access reviews, just making sure that you're on top of it, and then making sure that you're also monitoring the machine so that you can confirm that what they say makes sense.
Cool. Pretty simple episode. Hopefully that was helpful though. Just kind of a little bit of back to basics, because that's important. It's important to deal with these things. And like Milou mentioned at the beginning, it doesn't matter whether you're a large company with lots of people doing it or a small company that just can't keep up with these things. It's important to have some of these pieces at least in place. If you don't have all of them, just like any other security conversation, the first step is the most important one. You don't have to feel like you have to do them all. So get out there and get started.
Yeah, loop in your IT team.
Yes. Cool. Well, again, appreciate you all as always, joining us, whether this is your first time or your 100th-ish time, because we're past that point already at this point. So plenty in the back catalog if you want to get caught up. But we love hearing from people. So hit us up on LinkedIn. Look for our posts. Just look for Socializing Security, pretty easy to find. Or hit us up at info@socializingsecurity.com. And Milou and I will both get that. And love to hear from you. Love to hear about guest ideas and topic ideas and whatnot. So with that, I think we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.